Welcome to the April 26, 2018 episode of Reactive Consciousness, our in-depth podcast about what happened this week in our lives. I am your host, vysethebold, and this is...
Lotus Prince.
And OldManStompy.
Getting better and better at doing that intro.
We try so hard. We've had 93 episodes of practice. And this was the best take.
What's good about this is that this is a joke basically only for us that I start this off with.
Yeah, the viewers are just sitting there at home like, I guess Vice has to practice with the intro.
I'll be honest, I go along with this despite never knowing if this even makes it into the final version of the podcast half the time.
For those of you who don't know, I notoriously screw up the intro, especially on Reactive, because it's not worded, I guess, the best. I need to shop the script. I think
it is kind of a tongue twister to say, just like, welcome to the whatever the date, 2018 ish. Like, just each time it's just a little weird to say, like, welcome to the April 25th or whatever you said.
Yeah,
2018, it's 25th, 2018. Yeah,
there's a flow issue. We'll have to workshop that. But anyway, we this week wanted to talk about a couple little updates. I know Lotus and I have been looking after this one, and OldManStompy, I don't know whether you've been following this as well, but the SD to SNES has been having like steady updates of its Super FX capabilities. Have you heard about this recently?
So I'll defer to your knowledge on this case.
Okay, so the SD to SNES is of course for a lot of longtime listeners know this already, but it is the most capable Super Nintendo flash cart out there. It can do a lot of different special chip games, as well as all the normal games, and still have all the same functionality. And plus, it also has its own really cool functionality in the fact that it can play games with audio, like Redbook audio tracks and CD quality audio, which is really neat. It's something that the Super Nintendo couldn't do without it at all. So it adds capabilities to your system. One of the big things about it was that it was supposed to have expandability. Like, you were supposed to be able to come out with... it has an FPGA in it, which will allow you to make different cores in it to simulate other special chips going down the line. So it had done a lot of the more important special chips, like the Capcom one that is there for Mega Man X 2 and 3, for instance, that allows it to do polygonal stuff. But the big thorn in the side was that you still couldn't play Super FX games. 3 games in particular are the ones that people care about: Star Fox, Star Fox 2, and Yoshi's Island. Yoshi's Island is probably the big one. It still can't do a few other ones. It still can't do the SA1 chip, which is what Mario RPG and Kirby Superstar and Kirby Dream Land 3 are on. But those are basically the only big 3 games that you can't play with this thing. So it pretty much almost has full capabilities now. Somebody added for the long time, the progress on this hadn't been made at all. Just small incremental updates, things like cheat engines were added, like by the developer, and somebody out of the blue, like a fan, somebody who wanted to work on it, came out with it, and basically perfected it in almost about a week. People have been wanting this capability from the cartridge for years. It's been like 4 or 5 years. And this guy continues to keep on making updates. And he's making it more and more accurate in terms of clock speed, and also adding new features to it. And also, you can even increase the clock speed, so you can increase the frame rate of Star Fox and Star Fox 2. So it's pretty cool. I actually don't have much of a use for my my SNES Mini now.
oh darn.
Yeah, but
I'm
cool.
I'm keeping your $80, by the way.
I would hope so. I wouldn't want you to give it back to me, and like, what kind of friend would do that? It's shitty. Oh, this other thing came out a year later. Can I have my money back?
Yeah.
That's what a shitty thing to do. But what I mean is, I'll probably end up selling it to somebody who wants that kind of experience. I want it like a more full featured experience.
Well, you could sell it to OldManStompy for $80.
He already has one.
Oh, you can sell it to OldManStompy for $80 though.
You could
And
try.
I already opened it.
Oh,
Yeah, we know I never take anything out of the box, so
that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're goofy. But yeah, I mean, it's just really neat. I think they're on version 8 now. I don't know if Lotus you've been following, but
Nah, I don't even know what that means.
yeah, it's version 8 of the
Like, I haven't been following this
Super
at all.
FX.
Like, you told me it has Super FX updates, and I was like, oh, that's amazing, but I still, like, I don't have an SD to SNES, so it's just cool on principle.
Yeah, and then I believe we talked about the Mega Man X collections last week.
Yeah.
But I'm still really looking forward to those. So
Gotta
there's
have
still
that Mega Man X7, baby.
Yeah.
You punk, you punk, you punk, you punk, you punk, just all day.
I feel like that's something that I would love to see you and OldManStompy play together.
I have played
watched
Mega Man
Luminaire
X7.
play that. I don't want to play that.
I beat that game a long time ago.
Honestly,
now I'm
other than
sorry.
emulators, like on the actual systems, I'm not even really into playing like the good Mega Man X games. They're just never really my thing. Like, I think they're cool as hell, but I just am not very good at actually playing them.
I never really liked them. I liked the original Mega Man X, but then I didn't used to be a good enough player back in the day to play them. But now I've gotten actually better at Mega Man style games, so I'm definitely going to revisit them. I'll probably end up getting them on the Switch because their Mega Man games are great portable.
I just remember Mega Man X7 is the best Mega Man X game ever made.
So we're now only missing the Mega Man PC collection, which would feature Mega Man DOS, Mega Man 3 DOS,
yeah,
and
Mega
Mighty
Man
Number
3.
9.
Ugh. Terrible. And they have those like really shitty drawn like portraits. Ugh.
Remember
That's
that
the
it's
worst part.
you're not a true completionist unless you watch all of Mighty Number 9's credits.
Oh, and the Game Gear Mega Man. Goddamn.
Yes,
And,
that one's
by the
also
way-
like horrible. They solved the smaller screen problem by just making the camera angle really tight
cutting.
on Mega Man.
Yeah, no, they cut off the screen that was there. Rather
Well,
than
there's
like,
also the
building
Game Boy
around
Mega
it.
Man games where like you can't see 2 feet in front of you, so the game's super hard.
No,
Well,
but
those-
the Game Gear games are egregious. Those games are designed with that in mind.
Yeah, the Game Boy games were designed. I mean, we talked about this. I mentioned I was playing the Game Boy Mega Man games when we were podcasting at Luminaire's house, and
Yeah.
like they're super tight, and like it makes the going back and playing the NES Mega Man games feel like you're playing on the moon or something because like the
Yeah.
areas are so spacious.
Yep.
It's like you took off your weighted clothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm super excited about those. They still haven't revealed on the SNK collection what the extra games are going to be, but I'm willing to bet that they're going to add some really early SNK games, like probably from their first game, which is called Osmec, I think. I think they'll add that, and I think they'll probably add Baseball Stars for the NES, if I had to guess.
Oh wow!
Which would be really great. A lot of people consider Baseball Stars to be probably that and RBI Baseball. Both of those are considered probably the top tier baseball games for the system. So I would hope that they put Baseball Stars 1 on there because it was probably the most full-featured baseball game on the entire system. It allowed you to play a whole season and trade players and things like that, like salaries. It was pretty in depth, but it was also a lot of fun. Like the actual gameplay was a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. But I think the majority of this episode is going to be a lot of reactions to recent wrestling events.
Yeah, like, why else would you guys have me if it wasn't for like a gigantic wrestling
talk
event?
about magic and wrestling.
Hey,
now, get the hell off for a couple.
I did magic already. You gave me one during CoreCon on Tuesday. Now I'll get out of your hair in 45 minutes or so.
Yeah, where's Pyro? Can we have Pyro back?
I don't know. Is he busy? I'll leave. I swear to God.
the last CoreCon we had talked about us being glad for his demise. So
yeah, but now OldManStompy's worn out his welcome. So let's just get this wrestling thing over with.
By our standards, that was like an hour ago. By the listener standards, that was like 2 days ago.
Yeah. Whoa, is Pyro okay? Jeez.
So like from
it's
our
been this long and they still don't know where he is.
From our standpoint, it's an even faster turnaround. Is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
like I've pissed you guys off that quickly.
Oh, I was thinking the other way around. Like from the listener's perspective, like it's been 48 hours and we're still like we don't know where Pyro is. It's like, oh no.
Oh, Pyro, please give us 5-star ratings on iTunes. Please comment on the videos. Any bit of encouragement helps keep the show going.
That's great. But yeah, talk about the grappling men, please.
Yes, the sweaty grappling men. So there was a pretty big deal wrestling event pretty recently. Like the biggest big deal wrestling event.
The biggest deal of the manufactured sporting event.
Of the completely fictional sporting event in which all of the outcomes are predetermined and the points don't matter. So WrestleMania was in New Orleans at the start of the month.
Was Drew Carey there?
Yes. And so just to frame things a little bit, there was a fairly substantial like meta announcement for the WWE like right before WrestleMania, which was that they had partnered with Saudi Arabia for like a 10-year partnership to start doing shows for like one of the Saudi princes who was like funding this gigantic event at the end of in actually like a week. I think it's actually this Sunday. They're calling it the Greatest Royal Rumble, which is like literally the regular Royal Rumble except with 50 people instead of 30 people.
So it is the greatest.
Yes. So plus all the men's titles are being defended on the show, and they're hauling the Undertaker out of cobwebs to have like his first non-WrestleMania match in a long time.
Wait, but didn't he retire though?
So he unretired at WrestleMania. We'll get there. We'll get there.
What?
Unretired.
But like you can imagine, like he's 53 and he barely wants to wrestle at all, except that I'm sure they pay him a lot of money to show up at WrestleMania. So like, how much more money must they be paying the WWE for him to fly all the way to Saudi Arabia and get involved in a low stakes match against basically nobody? Yeah,
right.
Wow.
So people knew going into WrestleMania that they had this show that Saudi Arabia was basically paying, most likely in the tens of millions of dollars, for the WWF to stage it in their country. It was being aired on the network, so it's going to be canonical. Like everything that happens there, like a title can change plausibly, as opposed to like the house shows they air, where like technically the titles are always defended, but they never actually change hands because it would be absurd for that not to happen on television or at a pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So, like, there's this just random show that nobody knew existed on the calendar and happens to be, like, 3 weeks after WrestleMania and, like, might actually be bigger stakes than WrestleMania just because of the amount of money that's involved, like, in the production of the show. Wow. So, just setting the stage for that, there were, 4 or 5 really big storylines heading into WrestleMania. One was Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar. That was the big main event. And this is supposed to be, like, Roman Reigns' final coronation. He's supposed to be finally the guy who like knocks off Brock Lesnar, who's like the dominant champion, the most dominant wrestler WWF has had in the last like 4 years.
Oh, OldManStompy. Not to super interrupt here, but I did want to mention that I had followed a recent Roman Reigns like interaction. Apparently, that was super good. Maybe you can comment on this.
Oh sure, yeah, go ahead.
It just reminded me of it. Apparently, like John Cena was involved in a match with him, where Roman Reigns was supposed to win.
Yeah.
And apparently just like Roman Reigns just doesn't have the skill on the mic that John Cena does. And just basically John Cena was just fucking with him the whole time.
Yeah,
that. What was that?
No, that did happen. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was pretty amazing because if I can explain to the viewers, he basically was like, he was basically like John Cena was like very close to basically breaking kayfabe and just basically saying, I wouldn't need to be here if you were good.
Yes, he literally said that. Like I could retire if you were good at your job.
Wow.
But instead, I'm going to I'm basically here to lose so that you could take over. But really, like I shouldn't even need to be here.
Wow.
Because I'm like in movies and shit. But they still need me because you're not as good as me.
So like this has been a habitual like thing with Roman Reigns, that they keep just like throwing other popular people at him and like having them lose to Roman Reigns or talk well about
what
Roman
is it
Reigns.
About him that they like? What is it about him that they like specifically?
Well,
like, why are they promoting him?
I mean, Roman Reigns is excellent. He actually is extremely charismatic. The only problem is that he's playing against type, and he has the same issue with his character that John Cena used to have. And that's that, like, they used to play up John Cena as a tremendous underdog, that he was consistently overcoming the odds all the time. And, like, that was the exact opposite of John Cena in the ring. He was basically fucking Superman. He never lost anything, ever. You know, he would take on, like, 2 or 3 guys at once and he would win. And like, so it was completely implausible that he would ever be the underdog, or there was
it's not good for Rocky to continually win because he's not supposed to. Like, he's supposed to overcome like his own
right. But
like,
he never
journey.
he never has that. Nobody really cares about like the intermediary stage where it looks like he might lose. Like, still never happens because the babyface character usually wins on the weekly television shows also. You know, so there's no middle chapter between pay-per-views where John Cena is like losing 3 or 4 times in a row and then learns to overcome that to win his big pay-per-view matches. Like, sometimes he gets beaten up, like, sure, that happens, but never with any stakes in the line, never in an actual like sanctioned match. Wow. And so Reigns kind of has the same problem. He really should be like a berserker. Like, he should be just this like blood and guts brawler who beats the shit out of everybody. He's really good at that character. He played it for a couple of years before he became a main event wrestler. And now they just insist on making him into the next John Cena when he's not. He doesn't have as much charisma as John Cena. And it's very, very obvious that he was chosen as, like, the successor to John Cena. That makes it hard to perceive him as the underdog. You know, when
he's not naturally going to fall into it like, you know, like Stone Cold Steve Austin, for instance. Like, Stone Cold Steve Austin had charisma for days. And, like, if they hadn't made him, like, a superstar, it would have been weird.
And,
you know,
like part of Stone Cold Steve Austin was that he had Vince McMahon to play off of, and Vince McMahon is one of the most hateable assholes like that has ever graced.
He's a great bad guy.
Yeah. So Austin, he very rarely actually held the title. I think his longest title reign was like 5 months.
But he was also like the most popular wrestler of his era.
Yeah, exactly. And like, part of what got him so much heat was that people just loved to see Vince McMahon get the shit kicked out of him on weekly television, week in and week out, all the time. And, like, Austin was happy to oblige every fucking week. He would give him the finger, he'd pour some beer on him, give him a stunner, and the crowd would cheer. It was so easy to do.
But, like, what I'm saying is their superstars are usually, like charismatic on their own. They don't need the help. Like The Rock, for instance, was a very big underdog. You know, when he started, people hated him. Same thing with John Cena. But like their charisma showed through. Right?
But that was part of it. Like, The Rock, he was positioned in the role that Roman Reigns is right now as like the next big thing, and people hated that. They didn't want him to do that. He hadn't proved himself yet. He hadn't shown off any of his charisma, and they did turn him heel. They made him like there's a phrase in wrestling that you have to be hated before you can be loved. And like CM Punk took this route, Daniel Bryan took this route. They all got their chance to play like really like shit-eating grin heels for like long periods of time before like their true personality shone through. Like, that was their best chance. Like, the baby faces in WWE are so like bland and like boring that you have to have a character base to build off of before people can take you seriously. And Roman Reigns did not get that like intermediary period.
I mean, that's just like all the, you know, that's kind of like, you know, in comic books, you know, where you have like a really cool villain becomes like a good guy, you know, because everybody really likes those villains.
Well, no, actually, speaking of which, that was going to bring me to a question anyway, but I know that in wrestling you have not the character, but the person, the wrestler behind them, where after such and such a role, they pick up like another role. Like Mick Foley has been Mankind. He's been I think it was Jake was it Jake the Snake or Cactus Jack?
Cactus Jack.
It's both of them.
No, Jake the Snake was way before Mick Foley's time.
But yeah, but he's been like several different roles. So like you could rebrand these people. Like I remember you said that like OldManStompy, you had said that one of the this is embarrassing, I'm forgetting, one of the more popular wrestlers was supposed to be like a circus ringmaster, was it? Who was this?
Oh, so okay, I'll tell you this story. This is actually a super interesting story because it sort of explains to you how hard it is for the WWF to come up with gimmicks on their own. Yeah. So there was a guy, he used to be in a team called the Hollywood Blondes because he had like this long blonde hair.
That was the gimmick.
That was basically his gimmick. It was like two assholes from Hollywood with long blonde hair, and they won the tag titles in WCW. And this guy, he was having trouble getting into the main event, so he jumped ship to WWE. And they put him with the $1 Million Man. They called him the Ringmaster. They had this like fucking goofy circus gimmick where he was just a hired goon for the $1 Million Man. And so eventually he wanted to take on a name that was more like a hired assassin because he was the hired gun for the $1 Million Man. So they sent him a bunch of like assassin names that they came up with because like a common name for an assassin is an Iceman, you know, or like you know, in mafia terminology. So they called him like Otto von Ruthless and Fanged McFrost.
That's like a Carmen Sandiego villain.
I know
name.
they're so fucking stupid.
Otto von.
What happened was like they gave him a chance. Like, okay, if you can come up with a better name than the shitty names that we've come up with that really sticks with us, like we'll take it. And so he goes home. And he's like, the apocryphal story goes. I will never know if this is true, but this is the story that's been corroborated by most of. Yeah, this is the legend. Yeah. Was that he like sat down to drink some to go to bed with his wife, and his wife serves him a cup of tea, and she's like, "You drink your tea, dear, or it'll get stone cold." And so now he goes by Stone Cold Steve Austin, and that is how like this guy never.
Here's this goes back to my question though, because like. He was the ringmaster, and then he was Stone Cold Steve Austin, even though, like, the man is the same, it's a different character. Mm-hmm. But has wrestling ever done what Vice described, where the same character turns good, and he has to deal with, like, I want to be a villain, but it's, like, I gotta resist my evil urges and try to be a babyface, that kind of thing?
So, I can kind of comment on this in that, from what I know in wrestling, you only really change your character if you're not, like, super popular. So, like...
No, sure, but I mean, for character arc, though, have they ever had a heel turn babyface or vice versa, and it's the same character, and they just have to deal with their alignment change?
That happens all the time. Like, it's extremely common, even amongst the very popular characters. Probably the most famous example in history was Hulk Hogan in the late 90s, turned heel.
Turned Hollywood.
He became Hollywood Hulk Hogan, yeah. So, like, this is actually really funny to watch in hindsight, because when he comes out to betray, like, to join, there was the WCW had brought over two very popular WWF wrestlers, Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, and the idea was that it was like a reality-based storyline, that they showed up, they were using their real names, or you know their stage names, but like their real names and not like a superhero wrestling name. And they just showed up in the stands one day in plain clothes, and they would come and they would be like, "You know who we are, but you don't know why we're here." And they would just, like, beat the shit out of everybody, and they were just, like, this faction that existed outside of, you know, like, in kayfabe, but outside of the regular kayfabe of the WWE universe. Like, it would almost be like Spider-Man showing up and Venom showing up all of a sudden in a DC comic book, like, for no reason whatsoever. It's like, you know who these people are? Or, no, like, Peter Parker and Brock, what's his name?
Eddie Brock.
Eddie Brock, yeah. If they just showed up in the middle of a DC Comics and, like as reporters... And you're like, what are these two people doing here?
Oh, it's just like, at that point, I would think it was like the artist having a fun with an Easter egg or something. Like, what?
Yeah, but these are real actors, so obviously they're not yeah. So
they're winking at the camera.
Yeah.
Essentially.
So at one like major event, you know, Nash and Hall, they were like Hogan comes down and joins them, at the climax of a major pay-per-view. And if you watch them coming down, like the heel announcer for WCW, Bobby Heenan, is like one of the most famous heel announcers of all time. And he used to hate Hulk Hogan when Hulk Hogan was like the white meat babyface. He used to shit on everything Hogan ever did. He used to act like everything that Hogan did was just the worst thing imaginable. He used to reinterpret all of Hogan's actions as though like they were the worst possible like outcomes. So when Hogan is coming down, he's like, what is Hogan doing here? Is he the third man? And it turned out that time he actually was, the third man in the Outsiders, and he was set to betray all the baby faces in WCW. And that one time, it looks like Heenan was giving the whole thing away, like one of the biggest twists in wrestling history, except that was Heenan's character. So it's one of those things that looks really different if you watch it in hindsight, knowing that Hogan is the kind of guy who just wants everything to be about him, and that he like grafted himself onto the Outsider storyline so that he would maintain relevancy as this like dark, brooding 90s anti-villain,
Yeah.
So yeah, Hogan was a famous example. John Cena was going to turn heel apparently in 2011, but he didn't. Like, he just kept playing the same... he literally has been playing the same character for 11 years, but he's the exception.
Well, yeah, but wasn't that partly because he's, like, outside of the ring, he's, like, a genuine, like, inspiration to, like, children and stuff like that?
So
that'd be kind of messed up to turn him heel.
Well, so a lot of it is organic. Like, Steve Austin turned face famously at WrestleMania, I want to say WrestleMania 12. He had a match against Bret Hart when Bret Hart was a face, and Austin was a heel. And it was a submission match, and Hart beat Austin, but he had to beat him so bloody that they basically turned, like, that the crowd started to cheer for Austin because he was overcoming this unbelievably brutal submission match. And, like, he was clearly the underdog, because Bret Hart is a submission master in kayfabe. So, like, he put on such a gutsy performance. Like, it ended with him passing out in a pool of his own blood in Bret Hart's submission. It was... like, they overuse that a little bit now, but the thought of somebody, like, passing out in a wrestling submission, like, never happens. In a UFC fight, it would be stopped because the guy could die. That never actually happens in professional wrestling. So that was a real signature moment that got the fans behind Austin by showing him overcoming someone who still managed to beat him. Like, he worked his way up to becoming a dominant face. Like, so... Roman Reigns doesn't have that progression, really. He became a main event like face after his stable broke up, and he almost immediately, like the very next WrestleMania, wound up competing for the title. He didn't have that transition where the fans had a chance to get behind him as he struggled up through the ranks. There's no narrative.
Didn't you mention that during, like, I think it was last year's WrestleMania, or like whatever the big event was, where, like, the Undertaker's streak was, like, never broken for, like, decades, and all of a sudden Roman Reigns just beats him, and it's whoa.
So the Undertaker was beaten very suddenly by Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 30 4 years ago. And so Roman Reigns is now also the only other guy to beat the Undertaker at WrestleMania. And that's an example of how they keep dropping the ball with Roman Reigns. So they set up this match. We had no idea. We suspected, but we had no idea that it would be an Undertaker retirement match. Like, people, since it was kind of odd to have Roman Reigns face the Undertaker when he should normally be competing for the championship, it was kind of weird they'd be giving him this, like, shine to have him face the Undertaker when the Undertaker slot is, like, one of the most highly contested at WrestleMania. So there was almost no build-up whatsoever. The whole thing was that Roman Reigns would just go into the middle of the ring and say, like, the Undertaker thinks that this ring is his yard, but I'm going to tell him it's my yard now. And, like, that was basically the gist of his promos. The Undertaker, he rarely actually showed up, except for a couple of weeks before WrestleMania, so they had no chance to do a back and forth. Not that the Undertaker really talks a lot in the ring anyway. But there was no, like, face-to-face, except, the couple of times he appeared. There didn't appear to be any stakes. And, like, nobody wanted Roman Reigns to be the guy to retire The Undertaker anyway. Like, why does he deserve to be the guy who retires one of the biggest icons in sport, in wrestling? So then, they had the match, Undertaker lost, and then he, like, takes all his gear off and leaves it in the middle of the ring, and we're like, oh, that was his retirement match. I guess it really was.
Yeah.
But there was almost the next
build up to it.
Yeah, the next day follow-up was fantastic. Like, Reigns just came out, he stood in the middle of the ring, and the crowd just chanted "fuck you" at him for literally, like, 5 minutes on live television.
Yeah.
And he just sat there and took it, and he said, like, this is my yard now, and he put the microphone down and he left. And, like, that's the kind of character that Reigns really should play, just like a guy who doesn't give a fuck about anybody. And just wants to beat the crap out of people and be the dominant, fighter, like Conor McGregor or something. Like, just a guy who wants to just beat the crap out of everybody. and talks a big game and then backs it up. So like eventually he can transition into the heel role very naturally, because like someone will come up who has like a more pure motive, and will want to root for them, and you can even put more hate in Roman Reigns by having him beat that guy. Right, you could do all this stuff, but they don't. They just play Roman Reigns like he's a babyface all the time, that he's like not the chosen one, and that he has to overcome all these odds, and it just is completely unbelievable.
Well, it's a little late for it now, but even aside from, like, it would have been more relevant at the time, but even aside from having him beat a babyface or something, they could have used the crowd's toxicity and had Roman be like, you know what, fuck all y'all, and just turn to heel, like, that way.
So, there's a great, like, comic book. So, Boom Comics does a WWE imprint, too. Mm-hmm. And their story version of Roman Reigns is fantastic, and it's so simple, and it feels like... Reigns, he once came out, like, after the Undertaker match, and he gave a promo after the crowd stopped chanting, fuck you, and he was like, I'm not a good guy. I'm not a bad guy. I'm just the guy. Like basically telling the crowd, like, I'm the guy. You're gonna have to deal with me for the next, like, several years until some other guy comes up. And so, like, they did this whole story because Reigns' dad, he used to be, part of, the traditional, like, foreign heel. They used to be a stable called the Wild Samoans, a tag team. Being, like, pretty traditional, like, exploitation of, two foreign-looking guys to be, like, bad guys. Like, the fans never really cared about their characters or their personalities.
Is he genetically related to The Rock, then? Because is he part of that Samoan family?
He is part of that family. I don't know if he's genetically related to The Rock or if it's, like, a Blood Brothers kind of thing.
Okay, because I know that The Rock has a lot of actual blood relatives, like, in wrestling.
Yes,
Yokozuna is one of them.
Yeah, right? So, well, I mean, they're all from American Samoa, so like it's a very tight knit wrestling community. I don't think they're all related by blood. I'll have to check my family tree. I know that Reigns is the son of one of the Wild Samoans. Okay. I know that The Rock is related to Nia Jax, who's the current like Raw Women's Champion.
Okay.
And like it does matter a lot to be related to The Rock because The Rock carries so much credibility in wrestling circles.
Sure.
They did try to do this. They had The Rock come out. So Reigns won a Royal Rumble, and he got booed for winning the Royal Rumble in Philadelphia. And The Rock came out to make the save because Reigns got attacked as a follow up to the Royal Rumble by a bunch of heels. The Rock came out and they booed the fucking Rock because like who gives a shit? They like the fans were tired of the WWF just throwing guys at Roman Reigns in the hopes that it will get Roman Reigns cheered. So they're like, oh god, they're sending The Rock out here. Like I don't want to cheer The Rock if it means I have to cheer Roman Reigns. And so The Rock, he's like holding up Reigns' hand and like pointing at him, and has this look on his face like they're booing The Rock. This has never happened before.
Wow.
They had Reigns go over Daniel Bryan in one of his last matches, and Bryan had to come out and give this promo about how Reigns was the man. And it felt so, like, forced, because people are organically behind Daniel Bryan. He is one of the most organically popular stars they've ever cultivated. And to have him, like, lay down for Roman Reigns, basically, just, like, felt like a big shit on the fans' faces.
Mm.
So, fast forward a bit, let's get to WrestleMania. Roman Reigns, he has a title shot against Brock Lesnar, and by this point the fans were in like full Stockholm Syndrome mode. It's like just have him beat Brock Lesnar already. Let's end it. Let's finish this. Let's have him let's get over this storyline hump and see what they're going to do with the character next, and we'll deal with it because we've had like babyface main event characters that we didn't really like that much, and we know like where to focus on the show, where there is wrestling in the WWF that actually caters to the hardcore fans, and we'll just pay more attention to that after the storyline is over. So let's have him have his coronation, get it over with. And he fucking lost. Like, Lesnar fucking beat him.
Huh.
And, like, the match wasn't even that good. Like, Lesnar really just beat the living shit out of him. It was barely a competitive match. I was just in shock watching it. At the tail end of, like, 7 hours of wrestling that day. And so, why it's so important that, I gave this little, like scene setting beforehand was that now people are curious, like, are they going to do the title change at the Saudi Arabia show because they're getting so much money to do the show there? And does that make WrestleMania an afterthought? Because they know they're going to get a lot of money for doing WrestleMania, but they want to do something really, really exciting and to like really put a punctuation mark on this new show they're doing to open up this 10-year partnership with Saudi Arabia. Like, is WrestleMania now like the pre-show to the greatest Royal Rumble? And it left people feeling really dissatisfied. in general. So there were also the 2 Royal Rumble winners. So there was Asuka on the women's side, and there was Shinsuke Nakamura on the men's side, and both of these guys are like incredibly popular Japanese wrestlers who like people were very surprised to see win the Royal Rumble because it's so unusual for the WWF to give a non-American or Canadian or non-white wrestler like that kind of rub. And they also both lost their title matches. So the narrative is that Asuka lost to Charlotte, who is Ric Flair's daughter, and that she won that match because they're going to build up to a title match against Ronda Rousey next year at WrestleMania. And it will be the first time that a women's match main events WrestleMania, which is like something that I can get behind. But like in the short term, in general, like all of these title matches, it makes it feel like all the storylines that we were following for like the whole WrestleMania season were just a waste. Like for the purpose of setting up these matches that will take place sometime between like the Greatest Royal Rumble and WrestleMania of next year. So that was kind of like a theme of the show. There were like little payoffs, and the day before WrestleMania was the NXT show, which was fantastic, possibly like the best show that a WWF brand has ever put on. We talked about that journalist Dave Meltzer who reviews wrestling shows. He gave that show 2 5-star matches, which I think it's only like the second or third time in history he's ever had it. He's ever rated 2 matches on a single show 5 stars. That's pretty high praise. It's actually really funny because he mentioned that when he looked at the Google trends for like the week after WrestleMania, he said that he personally was like the 8th highest rated search after it, juxtaposed with WrestleMania. So it's like WrestleMania Lesnar, WrestleMania Reigns, WrestleMania Rousey, and then at 8th place is like WrestleMania Meltzer, because like that many people wanted to know what his ratings were.
Damn.
Or what he had to say about the NXT show, because they were so excited about like the fact that the WWF actually has a show which seems to have like to be like bereft of all the trappings and limitations that like really hold the main roster product from like back from appealing to hardcore fans, and like they really let these organic stories shine through. So like their main event was between 2 guys you probably never heard of, Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. I've never heard of them. They've had a grudge match which has been going on for like since summer of 2016. So they met in the first round of the cruiserweight tournament that they had that summer, and they were guys who would do. They were actually like really good friends. They were roommates, like moving through. So like they had a history, on the independent scene that we knew about vaguely coming into the match. They formed a tag team together. They competed for the championship. Ciampa betrayed Gargano after, as often happens in wrestling storylines, after they lost their titles. Their grudge match culminated in this fucking 37-minute no-holds-barred, just like 2 guys beating the absolute shit out of each other in what they called an unsanctioned match at that takeover. It was just like it was great, not because like it was especially brutal. Like they didn't rely a lot on what we would consider to be like especially violent spots. Like, oh my god, how did they do that without killing each other? Mm-hmm. But they told a really great story. Like at the very so Trump has been basically tormenting Gargano for the last like 8 or 9 months of storyline, and at the very end, like they did this little bit where like Gargano, the hero, he's got like a crutch. So like Ciampa, he like earlier on in the match, he like walks up to a planted guy in the crowd who's got crutches and just like scares him and like steals the guy's crutch, and like they show the guy like limping out.
So
of the
he
arena.
Literally has a crutch.
Yeah, and so like he has a crutch, so he's trying to beat Gargano with it, and Gargano like eventually steals it from him, like breaks it in half, so it's just like a splintered crutch, and then he's about to like wail on Ciampa, and Ciampa just like flinches at the last second. And this is like this like very beautiful moment where it's very clear that like Ciampa's just been like utterly broken by the 30 minutes of match they've gone through this far. It was just like fantastically framed by all of the action. It wasn't told by a body slam. It was told by by acting in the ring.
Sure,
that's great.
Yeah. So like that match got 5 stars, and there was a ladder match earlier on in the event where like 6 guys really did just like beat the absolute shit out of each other, in a oh my god, I think they really did die sort of way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, and Daniel Bryan's back.
Oh yeah, he got cleared to wrestle, right?
Yeah. So I hope that's actually true. You know, I hope that that they took all of his like medical concerns very seriously. Because it feels like he wanted to wrestle regardless of whether or not WWF cleared him or not, and the concern was that he was going to go to Japan after his WWE contract expired, which is I think sometime at the end of the late in this year, which would be worse for his health because the Japanese wrestling style is much worse at protecting your neck or your head. I mean, it's a different sort of issue because like Japanese wrestling has a less stringent schedule than the WWF does, but their individual, like their main event matches are much more brutal than like the worst WWE matches. So the chances of having like a paralytic injury are much higher.
They consider that risk as part of what they do.
So like one of the most famous Japanese wrestlers of all time, Misawa, he did die in the ring as a result of internal decapitation from accumulated damage to his neck from taking too many suplexes.
Shit.
And it hasn't stopped anybody in the ring from taking like a ridiculous amount of suplexes to the neck.
Jesus.
Yeah, like like that just sounds bad. Like internal decapitation. Ugh.
Yeah, like the head separated from the body, you just can't tell because the skin's still connected to the shoulders.
Well, it's basically a word for like your spinal cord being severed by like by some like vertebrae injury.
Yeah, It's like Christ's sake.
Yeah, so like it's still hard to watch. Like that video circulates around the internet, you know, every once in a while, especially like around the anniversary of his death, which is 14 years ago.
Wow. And
so like it's still hard to watch, and to know that these guys like Kenny Omega and Kazuchika Okada, all the guys who you'll know when you see them in Yakuza 6.
Well, is Kenny Omega isn't in 6, is he?
He isn't in 6, but most of the other like major and New Japan Pro Wrestling guys are.
Yeah, that I was aware of. I think there are actually like codes that were spread around online where you could like unlock them or something.
So Omega, I think he only recently became a heavyweight. So like he like meteorically shot up to the top of the card and became like one of the best wrestlers in the world. But I think that was before they decided to add these guys into Yakuza 6, because I mean that took a while to get localized into America. So like he became a heavyweight when AJ Styles left Japan, which was only a couple of years ago. Like he basically replaced AJ Styles as the leader of the Gaijin faction in New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Okay.
So that was still in like the transitional period where he was being elevated to the main event when Yakuza 6 was being developed. which is he was in the Tiger Mask W anime. Yeah.
Well,
so Let's see what else. What are the WrestleMania notes? So Paige, you know, one of the first like big women's wrestlers who came out of this like new generation where they've been taking the women's division seriously. She retired recently due to like a neck injury, not like a serious accumulation of neck injuries, but you know, it was just something that happens to wrestlers. Yeah. So she's retired and she became the GM of like the current SmackDown show. And so every year after WrestleMania, they shake up the rosters. It's like one of the most exciting aspects. No matter whether you like WrestleMania or not, the first couple of shows after WrestleMania are also always really exciting because you have like a non-standard fan base, like for the audience. You know, you have like all the people who flew into the area for WrestleMania, so you have like a lot of hardcore wrestling fans that you don't usually have. So the atmosphere in the arena is like electric.
That's great.
And they cater to that fan base because they know they won't cheer for Roman Reigns ever for any reason, for example. So they schedule the segments accordingly. Wow. It's basically like what I've been told is like the equivalent of like letting your 2-year-old like run around and like scream himself out before he goes to sleep. So they'll like deliberately put on like really exciting matches at certain points in the card to make sure that the crowd is tired, so that they won't swear at Roman Reigns too much.
That's incredible. You know what that almost reminds me of?
Because they already got what they wanted earlier.
Now, you know what that almost reminds me of? And this is utterly pathetic, but I remember back when like I would play soccer when I was in like the 3rd grade. You know, like the really little.
You are
kids
quite the gym jock,
dude. Even at that age, friggin' legend. But but you know how you probably do know how. Like, South Park made an episode on this. You know how the little kids are just kind of playing their little games, but the parents get so invested in this trivial bullshit, and they're, like, yelling at their kids or, like, at the other kids or whatever. I don't know. Like, it's been way too long. I don't remember if this ever happened at any of the things that I played at, but I think one of my parents told me that there were events maybe elsewhere or something, or when I was playing, I don't know, where the parents would be like issued lollipops before the game starts. So they'd be sucking on their lollipops so they can't scream like pieces of shit.
I thought it would be that they would have like a sugar crash like halfway through the match.
No, not even. It's just like it's literally like a pacifier. Okay. Like they're sucking on something.
This will shut the fuck up.
Yeah, this will shut you up.
That's awesome.
Pieces of shit. Yeah, so that it just reminds me of that.
So yeah, they know how to pace their shows, their 3-hour shows in WWF, so that like this is not as much of an issue.
Yeah.
So like the most famous example, like to give you one, was with CM Punk. So I know Vice that you follow CM Punk a little bit.
Sure.
But he quit like after the Royal Rumble, I think 4 years ago.
Sure.
And they had an episode of Raw in Chicago, which is his hometown, between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, when it was still unclear what his like status with the company was. He literally just walked out after the Royal Rumble and like never looked back. He didn't quit. He didn't like get fired. They just let his contract run out. So they had to deal with the fact they knew there'd be a Raw episode in Chicago where the fans would just be chanting CM Punk like all fucking day. So they started by having Paul Heyman, who was CM Punk's like old manager and like one of his best friends in the business, come out and cut this like whole promo, like blaming all the fans for like turning their back on CM Punk and booing him after. CM Punk had actually lost to The Undertaker and to Brock Lesnar like in high profile matches earlier in the year before he quit. So he just blamed the fans for like turning on him for like managing to lose all of his matches and like not getting behind him. And the fans were just eating out of his fucking hand. They were just like screaming at him. It's literally what we were talking about. He was just like trying to tire the fans out and like get them focused on like the first thing of she came out to CM Punk's music. So like they got this other blast where like everybody cheers because they hear CM Punk's music, and then they boo Paul Heyman, and then so
they got all tired out.
That's quite the move. Yeah. But by the way, that said,
they gave him a designated time in which they could be loud and angry.
Yeah. But by the way, that said, even as a strategic move, that's still, this applies to anybody who has to deal with this, like Roman Reigns or Paul Heyman. Even though Paul Heyman meant for this to happen, that's still got to be a psychological blow to have everybody just shitting on you for however long.
Yeah, actually, this was a big like topic of controversy about Ronda Rousey, because like people knew when she was coming in that she was going to eat up like a big chunk of the main event and basically jump in front of all of the other women's wrestlers who've been working really hard to get into the main event. And like Rousey, we didn't really know anything about her psyche. We know that she took like two really bad losses in the UFC and basically retired.
No, I was gonna say like we don't know about her psyche necessarily, but like she took the loss really hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like what happens then if she has to deal with this shit where the fans are not receptive to her at first glance and they boo her a lot for that reason, and they'll try to position her initially as a face because like she's a big deal coming in. So, like, what are they going to do? Are they going to, like, if she gets booed, are they going to turn her heel really quickly, and just, like, have her eat it up and, like, play into that, or are the fans just going to love her? And it turns out, thankfully, they did. Like, the fans fucking love Ronda Rousey.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when she's around, she's, like, seems super popular, and, like, even outside the ring, she's, like, the cool person, in interviews and stuff like that.
Oh, sure.
The stuff that got to her, like, I don't know how she responds to booing or whatever. Maybe it'll be bad, maybe it'll be nothing, but, like, the loss itself was what really sucked for her and made her, like, disappear from the air for, like, months. Yeah.
She was undefeated and then lost twice in a row.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, but even after the first loss, though, like, she took that terribly. And after the second loss, she disappeared, like, until she announced the wrestling switch over. But the first loss was rough.
Yeah, in the first loss, she fought Holly Holm, who was a boxer before she became a UFC fighter, I think, or trained as a boxer. And sort of Rousey was notorious for like being a terrible shadow boxer, which is
she's a grappler, right?
Yeah, she's a judoka. She was a bronze medalist in judo at the Olympics before she became a UFC fighter. Which made her a good, which kind of made her a good fit for professional wrestling, because like her really shitty shadow boxing actually makes like really convincing wrestling punches.
That's great.
So like there's a segment in her match. So she teamed with Kurt Angle, who is like 49 but can still go a little bit, against Triple H, who like looks like he's never gotten off steroids except when he was having kids, even though he's like 48 now, and Stephanie McMahon, his wife.
Well, Triple H lost to Ryan Reynolds, didn't he?
When did that happen?
Blade Trinity.
Blade. Okay, I was gonna say when we were talking about Blade and Torcon, I was like, wasn't Triple H in Blade? Is this gonna come back around to me at some point?
Not Blade 2, but all right.
The bad Blade movie.
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds and Triple H were like the only good parts of that movie.
Mm-hmm. He was in Saturday Night Live too with The Rock, I think.
Nice.
Yeah. And he did Lip Sync Battle recently. He did a song for Moana with Stephanie.
Wow.
So yeah, he there's a sequence. So in WWE, intergender violence is very strictly prohibited by like Mattel. Not necessarily that they wouldn't do it if they could get away with it, but like their toy contract with Mattel.
They did it with China in a very rare exception.
Yeah, but that was a long time ago, way before they had these. But there was a bit of an inflection point in their history when Linda McMahon ran for Senate in 2008. When they decided to make the product more family friendly, quote unquote, and they basically removed all the elements that wouldn't get a PG rating on television. So this I think was part of that, like in that same time frame. This is several years after China had left the company.
Gotcha.
But yeah, so like they often teased at several points in the match that Rousey would like beat the crap out of Triple H. And she wound up doing it. She like shadow boxed against him and like really drove him back into the corner of the ring, and the fans at WrestleMania thought it was like the greatest thing they saw all day. But my mom, who's a UFC fan, was watching it, and she was just like, she was watching the highlights on ESPN, and she was like, he should just hit her once and he'd knock her the fuck out. He's like 150 pounds heavier.
He's a monster, yeah.
So it was interesting how that difference in perspective happened. Like, Rousey looked like she was game for the fight, and under the rule-based approach of WWF, she was able to actually like land some punches on Triple H and drive him back into the corner until Kurt Angle could recover. Because like the rules for these intergender matches are supposed to be that you're only supposed to face your opponent. So like if the guy tags the woman in, then the other guy also has to tag their partner in, and vice versa.
No, do they ever make use of that? Do they ever say like, I want the other opponent to be in the ring, and so they tag out?
Well, sort of, because like the fans really wanted, the match was really between Ronda Rousey and Stephanie McMahon, and Stephanie was the heel, and there's no compelling reason whatsoever that she should have any chance in the ring against fucking Ronda Rousey.
Yeah.
So like that was what the match built into. That like Stephanie, she could just tag Triple H back in at any time. So they blue ball the crowd for like the first 10 minutes or so of the match. Where like Rousey never even got, and Triple H, he just like he looks like he should destroy Kurt Angle, because like Angle, we know his body's been wrecked by injuries and also alcoholism as part of the storyline. So like even though he's been sober for a long time, it like Triple H looks just so much beefier than Kurt Angle, because like Angle's been devastated by injuries. He just doesn't have as much muscle mass as Triple H does. Like it looks like that even that shouldn't be a compelling fight. So Triple H, he just like he tossed Angle around the ring for a long portion of the match and kept him from tagging Rousey in. And when she finally came in against Stephanie, the crowd exploded, and then she escaped. She thought, oh, I can escape, I can get Triple H back in the ring. It's like, nope, Rousey can beat Triple H too.
That's great.
And like part of it was that Triple H and Stephanie, they're the authority. So like they usually use like that to bully the referees around. So they told this like subtle story about how the referee was like losing control of the match and just like had just completely given the fuck up by the end of it, which is why he was allowed to keep Rousey in the ring with Triple H when normally that wouldn't happen.
Well, no, on one hand that makes sense from a story perspective, but Mattel though.
Well, they're sort of allowed at WrestleMania specifically.
Okay.
Also keep in mind, they're not equivalents. a woman beating up on a man is a lot different than
yeah, but OldManStompy said intergender though.
They did eventually set up that Kurt Angle was gonna put his submission hold on Stephanie. So they did also have it going the other way. And of course, like Stephanie, okay. She's the one woman who occasionally is allowed to take bumps for the men. So like she gets beaten up by Roman Reigns. That's
because she's like the new boss character for the most part.
But like it's really frustrating because usually that's not the case. Like she's one of the most frustrating people to have on television because she like constantly like screeches at and emasculates the other men, knowing that they can't do anything back to her. And like usually you'd expect that to be like a plot point. That like she'd continually hide behind this rule that exists that the men aren't allowed to do anything to Stephanie, but that humiliation that you expect that to build up to never comes. You think that, so like this was the one chance for that to happen, that they brought Ronda Rousey in, another like very compelling badass woman who like is elevated at such a level that Stephanie McMahon is actually compelled to have a match against her, as opposed to most of the other women's wrestlers for whom Stephanie would have no reason to get in the ring with because she's a manager.
Gotcha.
So this was a moment that it's another situation where part of the reason why Rousey got so cheered was that Stephanie is just like that awful of an on-screen character.
So it's almost like what you were saying earlier. It's like the same McMahon phenomenon. Mm-hmm. Like Stone Cold was cool anyway, but because he was beating up on Vince, it's like, you know what, just do it. Yeah.
So they brought Vince out to be Roman Reigns' foil for a little while, and it worked actually a little bit. Like he doesn't have as much heat as he used to, and he can't go in the ring anymore. He's like 72. So you still feel, even now, like you feel a little weird watching Roman Reigns beat up Vince McMahon because he fucking deserves it. But also he's like a 70-year-old man, and like Reigns is beating up a 70-year-old guy.
Like, it's weird in your head. Like I remember hating Vince McMahon, but
like sure, I'll cheer for they had the 25th anniversary episode of Raw a while ago. And Austin came out and gave McMahon a stunner. And Austin, he's also in his 50s. Like, he's not a young guy anymore. So, like, that's funny. I would cheer for that. I would cheer for, like, two fucking senior citizens. Like, willingly beating each other up in a recreation of their their golden years.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's WrestleMania. I guess, so I actually... the Greatest Royal Rumble is this next weekend, and personally I've declined to watch it because it takes place in Saudi Arabia. The women are not allowed to participate. Like personally I've decided not to watch the show. Not that it will have any impact on the WWF's bottom line, but it's very frustrating as a fan for them to have taken the women so seriously in the past year, and to all of a sudden to just put all of their efforts and all of their resources into the show where the women can't even compete. Yeah. It would have been nice if they put on like another very high profile show in some other area that just had all the women on it. Like you could easily do it.
That's the thing. This comes back to what we were talking about when you were first talking about the Women's Royal Rumble, and we had said like, well, it's cool that they did it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the WWE is progressive now. Like they need to follow through with it, and like you could argue that they can here, but like you said, to put so much effort into a place where it just doesn't work is disheartening.
Right. So, like there is like Saudi Arabia has extremely conservative regulations when it comes to women, including the fact that like a woman cannot go out unless she is accompanied by a chaperone in like a lot of places. And like it's actually kind of funny because
they can drive either.
They just got the ability to
drive, and I think to run for public office too was like recently added.
Shit. Okay.
Yeah, that's been within a year though.
Yeah, so like these are both like relatively recent developments.
Correct.
And I was sort of amused by this. Someone showed us like the seating charts for the Greatest Royal Rumble, and apparently like the women's seating, the like accompanied women's seating is like they're allowed to have all of the front row seats, and the single men are like all the way in the back.
Okay.
Wow.
I don't know why I gotta kick it. It's like they're trying a little bit, to like be progressive by putting women women
can't participate, but they get top
by giving women every advantage, like knowing that they faced so many hurdles just to even get to the fucking arena.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that was interesting. I will not watch the show, but it would be impossible to avoid the highlights, and I'm sure I'll hear all about it if Roman Reigns wins the title from Brock Lesnar at the Greatest Royal Rumble. I'm sure we'll hear. I have no idea. I have no idea what like the prize is for winning the Greatest Royal Rumble, or like if it has any implications in the storyline. Like when you win the
Greatest Royal Rumble belt.
Yes. Yeah. Well, usually these things get you a trophy, which is then later used as a prop to like beat somebody up. Like,
nice.
Like a couple weeks later. So, if that's the most that comes out of it, then it'll still probably be pretty satisfying. The women, they had a battle royal at WrestleMania. We talked about the Fabulous Moolah battle royal, about how Snickers got it changed. They got Moolah's name taken off of it.
That's right, yeah.
So I feel like I'm not sure if this was that much of a victory, because like the new trophy that they decided to give to the winner of the women's battle royal, like it looks like a fucking uterus.
Jesus.
Oh, I think I heard about something like that. Yeah, I think I remember seeing on the internet. Like, I can't wait to see the men's trophy. It's like a giant dick or something.
It's definitely a trophy. Like, it's clearly a cup, but it's a cup that's like shaped like a uterus, and the handles look like fallopian tubes.
Wow.
Yeah. And like, I can't tell. Like, someone must have done that on purpose. There's no way that was like just completely by accident.
So stupid.
So
Wow.
Like, don't let them off the hook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, just make like a dick trophy for the men, and we'll see where it goes.
Anyway, that's 50 minutes on WrestleMania. So if you guys have any other thoughts or questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
No, we should wrap up for this week, but we certainly I love to hear this kind of stuff, because I love the distillation of it. I don't like the actual.
Yeah, I'm not sitting through 7 hours of wrestling.
I would never make you watch wrestling.
No, like the stuff you do point out though is like fantastic. Like,
yeah,
the stuff that the matches you do show me, I'm just like, I'm glad I watched that. But that's the show for this week. Please remember to subscribe to the Corrective Consciousness YouTube and SoundCloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs ups, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps us promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement helps keep the show going. You can also catch us on Tuesday on our sister podcast, Corrective Consciousness, the podcast about our lives and pop culture. Finally, you can friend me as vysethebold on Steam, PSN, Xbox Live, Twitter, Switch, and Battle.net.
And you can follow me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up on Twitter at Lotus Prince. And if you are willing to see, or if you are interested in seeing my certain videos early, getting in on exclusive live streams, or even selecting upcoming games for me to Let's Play, then perhaps consider swinging by my Patreon account, which can be found at patreon.com/LotusPrince.
And you can find me as OldManStompy on most major social media and gaming networks, except for Steam. I'm also in the process of partnering with Saudi Arabia to issue the greatest Corrective Consciousness.
Whoa! But OldManStompy also refuses to listen to it.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's great. I don't listen to this podcast either, so.
No, touche. Yeah.
But you could catch more 4 Heroes of Light vitriol later.
Yeah.
On next week's podcast.
I was so over it until you reminded me just now. Like, thanks, Vice.
I like to open up.
He aims to please.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll catch you later. I'm tired as hell.
Until next time, everyone.
Cheers.